"Sleep beside me, just once," the wounded man said, while June Kincaid held a bloody needle over the hole in his side. "Not for comfort. If I sleep cold, I die." She stared at him across the narrow bed in the back room of her boarding house, lamp flame shivering between them. Rain hammered the roof so hard the whole place seemed to crouch under it. Wind shoved smoke down the stovepipe and filled the room with the bitter smell of soot, wet wool, and blood. The man on her mattress was broad-shouldered, mud-streaked, and pale as old bone. He had one hand clamped over his ribs, the other wrapped around the butt of a revolver he was too weak to raise. June pressed the needle point into the lamp black to harden it. "You break into my house at midnight, bleed on my clean quilt, and ask me to share your bed. I asked you not to let me freeze. That's a kinder version of the same thing." His mouth twitched once, almost a smile, then pain wiped it clean. "Fair enough." A slow knock hit the front door. Not a neighbor's knock, not hurried, not afraid. 3 measured thuds, the kind a man made when he already believed the house belonged to him. June went still. The needle trembled between her fingers. Outside, beneath the rain, she heard horses shifting in the yard, tack creaking, one rider clearing his throat. More than one, maybe 4, maybe 6. The stranger's eyes lifted to hers, gray eyes, clear even through fever. "If they ask," he said, voice rough as gravel, "you never saw me." She almost laughed at the gall of it. "If they ask, I might drag you to the porch myself." The knock came again, harder this time. June set the needle down, reached beneath the washstand, and pulled out the shotgun she kept wrapped in burlap. Her hands did not shake now. They never shook when danger announced itself plainly. It was the waiting beforehand that gnawed. She stepped to the door between the back room and hall. "Don't bleed out while I'm gone. Wasn't planning on it. Men like you never plan on the ugly part." She left him there, and moved through the boarding house, with the shotgun low against her thigh. The front room smelled of damp pine boards, stale coffee, and the ashes from the fire she had banked hours ago. Chairs stood upside down on 2 tables. The place had once been loud with teamsters, drummers, and families chasing work west. Now it was mostly silence, old ledgers, and June's own footsteps. At the front door she slid the bolt aside, but kept the chain latched. When she opened it a crack, rain blew in cold against her face. Sheriff Asa Crow stood on her porch in a slick black coat shining wet in the lamplight. 2 deputies flanked him, hats dripping. 3 more riders waited in the yard with carbines across their saddles. Crow's eyes were flat and pale, like river stones under shallow water. "Evening, Mrs. Kincaid," he said. "It was, until you put boots on my porch." He smiled without warmth. "Sorry to disturb your rest." "You're not." His gaze dipped to the shotgun, then rose again. "We're looking for a man. Then I pray you find one better mannered than the last drunk you brought here." Crow ignored that. "Tall, dark coat, horse went lame near the wash. He's hurt bad. Might try for shelter." June leaned against the frame. "And if he did, he murdered Deputy Fallon outside Piedra Gate. Shot him through the throat." Rainwater ran off Crow's brim and struck the porch boards with soft taps. June heard the horses blow steam into the storm. Behind her, somewhere in the back of the house, a bedspring gave one small complaining creak. Crow heard it too. His eyes shifted past her shoulder. "You expecting company?" he asked. June let one beat of silence pass, then another. "If I were, I'd choose a better night for it." One deputy snorted. Crow didn't. "Mind if we look around?" he said. Yes, that seemed to please him. "Meaning no? Meaning you need a warrant? And a territorial judge sleeps 3 miles east. Wake him if your man matters that much." Crow studied her face, as if looking for the place grief had split it and left it weak. Most men looked there eventually. They remembered her husband dying in the road, and assumed loss had hollowed her into something manageable. They were wrong. "You always were stubborn," Crow said softly. "You always mistook that for fear." For a moment neither moved. Rain hissed in the yard. Somewhere a shutter banged loose against the outer wall. Then Crow tipped his head. "If he comes through here, you send word. I'll light a lantern in the window. You do that." She shut the door in his face, set the chain, dropped the bolt, and stood listening until the hoofbeats finally pulled away into the dark. Only then did she breathe. When she returned to the back room, the stranger had pushed himself halfway upright and was bracing against the wall, revolver in hand. Sweat glazed his brow. Blood had soaked through the bandage she'd thrown over him. "You should have stayed down," she said. "Needed to hear if you sold me." "And? You didn't. Don't flatter yourself. I just dislike Crow." He lowered the gun. "That makes 2 of us. June set the shotgun aside and went back to the bed. Up close she saw what the storm and poor light had hidden. He wasn't old, but hard years had cut deep around his mouth. His beard was 2 days grown. There was a bruise at his temple, another rising along his jaw, and a bullet groove torn under his ribs where the flesh had opened ragged and black around the edges. Not a killing shot, but close enough if fever set in. She stripped off the wet bandage. He hissed through his teeth. "Hold still. You give all your guests this welcome? I bury the quieter ones." She threaded the needle and stitched. He gripped the blanket until his knuckles blanched white, but he made almost no sound. Outside, thunder rolled over the plains like wagon barrels tumbling downhill. After the third stitch she said, "Name." He kept his eyes on the ceiling. "Cole Braddock." The needle paused in her fingers. That name she knew. Not well, not personally, but she knew it the way people in small territories knew the names tied to ugly work. Cole Braddock rode once for Hollis Reddick, the cattle barons south of Dry Creek. Braddock was the man folks mentioned low, after a drink, when talk turned to burned fences, vanished debtors, and hired riders too disciplined to call themselves outlaws. June finished the stitch, tied it off hard enough to make him flinch, and rose. "You should have led with that," she said. He looked at her now, really looked. "You know who I am. I know enough. Then know this too. I don't ride for Reddick anymore. Men like Reddick don't let riders simply wander off." "No," Cole swallowed, throat working. "They send Crow." That made the room colder. June reached for his coat, meaning to search it properly this time. He caught her wrist. "Not rough, just fast. There's a leather satchel in the floorboard crawl," he said. "I shoved it there when you barred the door. If I'm dead by morning, don't burn it." Her pulse thudded once in her throat. "Why?" "Because your husband's name is inside." June went so still, the storm itself seemed to stop with her. Her husband, Daniel, had been dead 14 months. Shot beside his wagon on the Piedra Road and left in the dust like a butchered steer. Crow called it bandit work. Reddick sent flowers. Half the town looked sorry. The other half looked away. June stared at the man bleeding on her bed. "How do you know my husband's name?" she asked. Cole released her wrist. "Because he died trying to keep something out of Reddick's hands." He closed his eyes once, like a man bracing for a blow. "And because I was there." June's hand moved before thought did. The shotgun was against his throat in a breath, both hammers cocked. Cole did not reach for his gun. He only looked at her with that same steady, fever-bright gaze and said, "If you kill me now, you'll never know why Daniel died." And beneath the floorboards, hidden in the dark, the satchel waited like a second heartbeat. June should have pulled the trigger. For one raw, blazing second she wanted to. She wanted the stock hard in her shoulder, the blast in the room, the stain of him on her wall. She wanted 14 months of sleepless anger to leave her body all at once and drop him cold at her feet. Instead she lowered the shotgun, not because she forgave him, not because she believed him, because dead men kept their secrets. "Talk," she said. Cole let out a slow breath. "Water," she almost refused. Then she fetched the tin dipper, lifted it to his mouth, and watched him drink. Rain rattled the window behind them. The lamp flame bent and straightened. "When Daniel died," Cole said, "he wasn't carrying dry goods. He was carrying a ledger." June's jaw tightened. Daniel had told her that morning he was taking account books to the rail office in San Tomas. He had kissed her forehead, complained about a loose trace on the mule team, and promised to be back before dark. Ordinary words. Last words. "He kept books for half the valley," she said. "That means nothing." This one did. Cole looked down at the blanket. Reddick had been buying land that wasn't truly for sale. Widows, homesteaders in debt, Mexican families whose titles were older than the territory. He paid Crow to squeeze, threaten, forge, and bury. Daniel found figures that didn't fit. Tax receipts copied in different ink. Water rights transferred after the signers were already dead. June's fingers dug into the shotgun stock. "And what were you doing there?" she asked. "Riding guard on the men sent to take it back?" Silence fell so hard it seemed to thud. Cole didn't fill it. That, more than anything, made June believe him. Liars hurried. Guilty men sometimes didn't. At last she said, "Did you shoot him?" "No." "Did you stop them?" A beat. Thunder rolled far off. "No." That answer struck harder than a lie would have. June turned away before rage could show too plain in her face. She crossed to the stove, fed in a split of cedar, and watched the fire catch with a dry orange hiss. Behind her, Cole shifted on the bed. breath short with pain. "I could still send for Crow," she said. "You could. And why shouldn't I?" "Because Crow wasn't hunting me for Fallon." June glanced back. "Then for what?" Cole reached toward the floor and winced. Third board by the bedpost. She kept the shotgun in one hand and pried the board up with the other. Below it lay the satchel, dark with water, strapped tight. She pulled it free and set it on the chair. "Open it," Cole said. Inside were folded papers wrapped in oilcloth, a tarnished deputy's badge bent nearly in half, and a silver pocket watch with a cracked face. June forgot the air in her lungs. It was Daniel's watch. She knew the nick along the edge where he had dropped it on their first winter together. She knew the chain he kept knotted because the clasp was broken, and he refused to waste money replacing what still worked. Her hand closed around it so hard the metal bit her palm. "I took it from the road," Cole said quietly, "before Crow could." June looked at him over the watch, eyes burning. "Why?" "So I'd remember." "Remember what?" "What kind of man I was becoming." She wanted to hate the answer. She still did, but it had the rough shape of truth. At dawn the rain quit. A pale wash of light crept through the curtains and showed the room in merciless detail. Bloody bandages, muddy boot prints, Cole's coat steaming by the stove. June had not slept. She had cleaned the wound, changed the dressing, and read enough of the papers in the satchel to know he had not come empty-handed. Columns of figures, names she recognized, acre counts, false debts, water allotments shifted like loaded dice. Daniel's handwriting in the margins, sharp and slanted, noting discrepancies in careful pencil. By sunrise she had made her choice. She saddled the mule herself, rode to the spring house, and returned with fresh water and laudanum. Then she dragged Cole, half-conscious and cursing under his breath, out the back door to the old smokehouse hidden behind the cottonwoods. "If Crow comes back," she said, easing him onto a cot of feed sacks, "he won't find you in my bedroom again." "Thought you'd changed your mind." "I changed your location." A faint smile touched his mouth and vanished. All morning June moved through town as if nothing had shifted beneath her life. She opened the boarding house shutters, swept the porch, bought flour from Mrs. Ortega at the Mercantile. At the pump, women spoke in low voices about Deputy Fallon's death and the riders combing every arroyo between Dry Creek and Piedra Gate. One said the fugitive had slit Fallon's throat. Another said he had stolen army gold. Men embroidered fast when fear gave them thread. "Sheriff's offering $50, the barber said from his doorway. "For the man, or news of him?" June kept pumping. "Then I hope he's ugly enough to be worth it." But eyes followed her longer than usual. Crow had seeded suspicion well. By noon he came again. This time he did not knock. He stepped into the boarding house while June was kneading biscuit dough and removed his hat, as though manners might excuse trespass. Dust coated his boots now. The storm had blown east. "Quiet place," he said. It was. Crow rested one hand on the back of a chair. "You're a hard woman to read, June. That save me trouble or cause it? Depends which side of trouble you're on." She wiped flour from her fingers. "Say what you came to say." He watched her a moment too long. "Reddick himself is riding in by evening. Fallon was useful to him. Then you'd best find the killer." "I intend to." Crow's gaze slid to the hallway, then back. "Thing is, men on the run do foolish things. They beg help where they shouldn't. They tell stories a widow might want to hear." June said nothing. Crow stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Daniel stuck his nose where it didn't belong. That got him killed. Don't let grief make you repeat his mistake." The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. June met his eyes. "Get out." Crow smiled thinly. "There it is." "What?" "The part of you that still thinks justice lives anywhere near this valley." He left mud on her floor when he turned away. By late afternoon Cole was sitting up in the smokehouse, pale but steadier. June brought him broth, clean bandages, and the pages Daniel had marked. "You can read accounts?" he asked. "I can read my husband." She spread the sheets between them. Daniel's pencil notes formed a pattern once she stopped seeing them as grief's leftovers. Land parcels, names of those pressured off wells Reddick wanted. Transfers funneled through shell buyers. Crow's initials beside amounts that looked like legal fees until you counted how many men had disappeared after paying them. Cole pointed to one name. Tom Barrick. Refused to sell. Barn burned. June nodded. His widow left for Tucson. Another. Sanchez family. Water cut off first. Title challenged after. The smokehouse smelled of cured pine and damp earth. Flies worried the window screen. Somewhere beyond the trees a hammer rang from the livery, sharp and lonely in the heat. "You kept this all this time?" June asked. "Not all this time. I stole it 3 nights ago." "From Reddick?" "From Crow's desk." That surprised her enough to show. Cole looked away. "Fallon caught me. He drew first." June studied him. Not absolution, not trust, just measure. Then hoofbeats thundered on the road outside, too many for chance. A boy's voice split the air from the lane. "Mrs. Kincaid, sheriff says everybody indoors by sundown. Reddick's men are riding house to house." June and Cole looked at each other. The valley was closing, and this time, it was not coming with a warrant. It was coming with torches. By the time the sun dropped behind the red ridge, the whole valley smelled of dust, hot iron, and coming violence. June climbed to the boarding house roof with Daniel's field glass, and saw them first as moving streaks in the west, riders cutting through the last copper light, a long smear of dust boiling behind them. 10 at least, maybe 12. Hollis Reddick never traveled light when fear would do work for him. Below, Dry Creek folded itself inward, doors barred, curtains drawn, dogs vanished under porches. The church bell did not ring for supper. Even the blacksmith's hammer had gone still. June slid down from the roof and hit the yard running. Cole was already saddling the bay mare behind the cottonwoods, one hand pressed to his ribs. His face had gone ashen from the effort, but his movements were quick and practiced. "You shouldn't be on your feet," June snapped. "Reddick's not paying a social call." She thrust Daniel's satchel at him. "We don't split this up. If one falls, the other rides." He nodded once. No argument. That unsettled her more than if he had given one. From town came the first shout, then another. A window broke. Horses screamed somewhere near the livery, high and frantic. "Backwash," June said. "The arroyo past Miller's orchard. It'll hide tracks until the rocks." Cole swung into the saddle and offered her a hand. "With me, I have my own horse. Not if we want speed." The mare stamped, foam already silver on the bit. June hated needing help, hated the shape of that hand waiting for her. But the riders were closer now, and pride was a luxury that burned faster than lamp oil. She took it and mounted behind him. They broke from the cottonwoods just as the first torch hit the boarding house porch. Flame ran up the dry post with a hungry roar. June twisted in the saddle and saw her home catch light, first gold, then orange, then a hard devouring white, at the edges of the curtains. Every ledger Daniel had kept, every dish she'd scrubbed alone, every nail he had hammered into that place with laughing patience before the territory turned meaner than either of them expected. She almost cried out. Cole felt her go rigid. "Don't look back," he said. But she did, not because the building mattered more than life, because grief demanded witness. Then the mare plunged into the wash, and the world became flying sand, hoof strikes, cactus shadows, and the violent drum of pursuit behind them. Riders dropped in after them within minutes. June heard Crow's voice carrying over the thunder. "Take them alive!" Cole cursed under his breath. "That means the papers, not us." The arroyo narrowed, walls climbing on both sides in jagged clay. Moonlight pooled in the bends. Mesquite clawed at June's skirts. A shot cracked, spat sparks from stone, and ricocheted whining into the dark. June turned in the saddle, drew the revolver from Cole's belt, and fired once toward a muzzle flash. A rider shouted. Horse stumbled. The pursuing line kinked sideways. "Nice shooting," Cole said. "Keep riding." At the North Fork, the arroyo split around a tumble of boulders. Left led toward open flats. Right tunneled into a slot canyon, barely wide enough for one horse. Cole pulled right. June gripped his coat. "We'll bottleneck ourselves." "Exactly." The mare slid sideways through gravel and burst into the slot. Walls rose black and close. The air suddenly cool with old stone and trapped night. The sounds sharpened there. Every hoofbeat a hammer blow, every breath a rasp. At the far end, Cole hauled the mare up hard. "Off," he said. June hit the ground running before he finished. Together they shoved loose rocks into the narrow gap. The first pursuing rider entered just as the slide came down. Stone exploded in dust and noise. Horse reared screaming. Men cursed. For 10 precious seconds, the canyon became chaos. Then Cole doubled over, one hand to his side. The wound had opened again. Blood darkened his shirt. June caught him before he fell. "Can you move?" "Have to." "Can you?" He looked at her, breath sawing. "Ask smaller questions." They staggered up the canyon on foot, leading the mare. The moon climbed higher, washing the stone in bone-white light. Far behind, men dismounted and started climbing over the rockfall. When they reached the abandoned assay shack near the old silver diggings, June shoved Cole inside and barred the warped door with a timber. The place smelled of bat dung, old ash, and mineral cold. A cracked ore table leaned in one corner. Rusted pans glimmered beneath dust. June tore open his shirt. Fresh blood pumped between her fingers. "You're dying by inches," she said, still ahead of Crow. She packed the wound with clean cloth from her petticoat and wound it tight. His jaw clenched so hard, a muscle jumped near his ear. Outside, the canyon carried every distant sound toward them: boots on scree, a horse snorting, someone muttering that the pair could not be far. June tied the bandage off and looked up. Cole was watching her with an expression she could not name. "What?" she asked. "I should have dragged Daniel off that road." The words landed heavy in the dim shack. June sat back on her heels. Cole swallowed. Crow shot the mule first. Daniel jumped down before the wagon stopped rolling. He kept saying there'd been a mistake, said numbers on a page weren't worth blood. Crow laughed. Cole's voice thinned, not with weakness now but memory. When Daniel threw the ledger into the wash, Crow put a bullet through him. "I found the watch afterward, told myself I'd return it when I found the nerve to deserve daylight again." June did not feel the tears until one slipped cold over the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away angrily. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because if they break this door, I'd rather die honest than useful." Bootsteps scraped close outside. June rose and cocked the shotgun. The latch shuddered once under a kick. Again. Wood splintered. Then a voice called from the darkness beyond the door, too familiar and too near. "June," Deputy Ezra Bell said. "Open up. I can still get you out of this, Ezra." Daniel's old fishing partner, the man who had stood at the grave with his hat crushed in both hands, and wept like family. Betrayal went through her cleaner than fear. Cole saw it in her face. "You know him." "I did." Ezra's voice softened through the cracked boards. "Crow only wants Braddock. Give him up and this ends." June lifted the bar from the door just enough to create hope. Cole stared. "What are you doing?" She handed him the satchel. "Learning who I knew." Then she stepped aside, leveled the shotgun at chest height, and let Ezra Bell kick his way into judgment. Ezra came through the broken door bent low, revolver first. June fired before he straightened. The shotgun blast filled the shack like thunder in a coffin. Ezra flew backward into the moonlight and hit the dirt hard, gun spinning from his hand. Men outside shouted. One shot punched through the plank wall above June's shoulder, spraying splinters into her hair. "Back window," she snapped. There was no true window, only a rotted opening where boards had fallen away behind the ore table. Cole shoved the satchel through it, then hauled himself after with a groan that sounded torn from somewhere deeper than the wound in his side. June kicked out the lamp, plunging the shack into darkness, and followed him into the ravine beyond just as bullets ripped through the doorframe. They slid, half falling down a shale slope, into a stand of juniper, and kept moving until the canyon widened into the ruins of an old mission way station. Moonlight lay broken across collapsed walls, and a roofless chapel whose bell tower leaned like a drunk, too stubborn to fall. Only when the sounds of pursuit thinned behind them did June let herself stop. Cole sank against the chapel wall, breath ragged. June found a niche sheltered from the wind, dragged over a worm-eaten pew, and eased him onto it. Her hands worked from habit now. Knife to cut away soaked cloth, water from the mission cistern, needle passed through flame. The night air smelled of stone dust, sage, and old rain trapped in cracks no sun could reach. Cole flinched once as she stitched him again. "You're getting careless," she said. "I noticed." The moon showed the edges of him sharper now. Not the hired gun the valley feared. A tired man held together by stubbornness and consequences. When she finished, she sat back on the cold floor and pulled Daniel's watch from her pocket. It lay in her palm, silver dulled by years and weather, chain wrapped tight around itself like a thing trying not to come apart. Cole watched without speaking. "Daniel used to wind this before supper," June said at last. "Every evening," said a man who kept poor time, lost more than appointments. She opened the cover. The hands had stopped at 4:17. The hour they killed him, maybe. Or some other ordinary minute the world forgot. From his vest, Cole drew a folded paper sealed once with wax, now cracked away. "There's more," he said. She took it carefully. It was Daniel's handwriting. She knew the lean of every letter before she read the first word. "June. If Crow is right and this reaches you without me, go north, not east. The figures prove enough to hang better men than him, which is why lesser men will kill first. I am sorry to leave you fear in place of plans. But if I fail, do not let them teach you silence and call it peace." Her vision blurred. She pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth until the shaking passed. "I found it in the wagon seat seam," Cole said quietly. "Couldn't bring myself to hand it over until I had something worth setting beside it." June folded the letter with reverence and pain, then tucked it over her heart. "For 14 months," she said, "I thought his last thought had been surprise." Cole looked at the chapel floor. "Maybe it was you." That kindness was small enough to survive truth. Wind moved through the ruined mission with a low, hollow sound, as if the old place still remembered prayers. June rose, gathered broken pew slats, and built a careful fire in the cracked basin of the chapel brazier. Light climbed the stone in amber bands. It touched the niche carvings, the fallen plaster saints, the dust drifting like pale smoke. She sat across from Cole, knees nearly touching. "You said once you wanted to deserve daylight," she said. "Why steal the ledger now?" "Because Fallon bragged when he drank. About a family south of the Wash forced off water till their youngest died coughing mud. About Crow making Daniel kneel." Cole rubbed a hand over his face. "I had spent years telling myself I only rode protection. Not fire, not murder, just the edge of it. Then I heard Fallon laugh, and I realized a man who holds the door while wolves feed still hears the sheep." June watched the fire shift in his eyes. "You could have ridden on," she said. "I tried. Got as far as the state line. Turned back because I was tired of seeing my own shadow and knowing it fit." Outside, dawn was still hours away. The threat had not vanished, it had only widened, hunting quieter. Yet the chapel felt suspended from time, held between ruin and refuge. June reached into the pocket of her skirt and pulled out the blue thread bracelet Daniel had once braided for her from wagon twine on a lazy Sunday, laughing at his own poor handiwork. She had kept it hidden since the funeral because wearing it hurt. "Here," she said. Cole frowned. "That's yours." "It was. Now it means I stop burying the living with the dead." She tied it around his wrist, above the pulse. His throat moved. "June, don't speak." So he didn't. Silence settled, but not the earlier kind. This one had room in it. After a while, the night cold deepened. Cole's skin had gone chilled despite the fire. Fever still lived under it, hungry and sly. He tried to sit straighter and failed. June touched his forehead. Too hot. Hands too cold. Bad sign. He looked at her through half-lidded eyes. "You still have time to leave me." "No. Crow will use me to drag you under." He already tried. A faint, humorless breath escaped him. Then, after a long pause, he said it again, softer than before, softer than a plea had any right to be. "Sleep beside me." Just once, she held his gaze. Not because he was a man and she a woman alone in the dark, not because pain had made him bold, because she knew what he was asking now. Not hunger, not ownership, not comfort borrowed under false names. A witness, a reason to wake. June moved beside him on the pew, wrapped the old cavalry blanket around them both, and put one hand flat over the steady, dangerous beat beneath his bandaged ribs. His breath caught once, then eased. Outside, wind combed through sage. Somewhere far off, a coyote gave a single sharp cry and fell quiet again. By the time the first ash-gray hint of dawn touched the mission wall, Cole was asleep without fighting it. June did not. She watched the horizon pale through the broken arch of the chapel and understood, with a clarity that felt almost like peace, that she had already chosen her direction. When the sun rose, they would ride back into Dry Creek, not to run, to finish it. They entered Dry Creek at mid-morning, under a sky washed clean and hard blue, the kind of sky that made every lie below it look smaller. June rode first. That mattered, not because Cole could not hold a saddle, though the effort left him white around the mouth, but because everyone in town knew her. Widow June Kincaid, keeper of the boarding house now smoking black at the edge of town. Quiet June, careful June. The woman Grief had supposedly tamed. Nothing in her face offered tameness now. She and Cole came straight up the main street, past the barber, the feed store, the church, with its bell rope stirring in the faint breeze. Men stepped out from under awnings. Women paused at windows. Children were pulled back by quick hands. Word outran hoofbeats. By the time June reined in before the courthouse steps, half the town had gathered in a ragged horseshoe of heat, dust, and held breath. Sheriff Crow came through the courthouse doors, buttoning his cuffs. Hollis Reddick followed, immaculate in a dove-gray coat, despite the road, silver watch chain bright against his vest. He was a large man, gone soft at the middle, but his eyes were quick and mean. Men mistook polish for civilization. June had learned better. Crow's hand drifted toward his holster. "Mrs. Kincaid," he said, "you've saved us a search." June slid from the saddle with Daniel's satchel in hand. "I brought what you lost." Every eye in the street sharpened. Reddick smiled slightly. "That would belong to me." "No," June said, "it belongs to the people you bled." A murmur moved through the crowd. Tom Barrick's widow stepped from behind the blacksmith's post. Old Mateo Sanchez came hobbling from the shade with his sons at either elbow. Mrs. Ortega appeared in her flower apron, face set like stone. The valley had come to watch. More important, it had come to listen. Crow descended 2 steps. "You're excited, June. Hand over the papers and let's settle this private. My husband died settling things private." She opened the satchel and drew out Daniel's pages. Then the copied sheets she had made in the chapel at dawn while Cole slept a little longer by the fire. Copying by first light had cramped her fingers raw, but that pain had purpose. 1 set could be burned. 2 sets made a fire harder to control. "You wanted the originals," she said. "Shame. I sent the copies north at sunrise with Reverend Pike's nephew. Territorial judge in San Tomas should enjoy them by tomorrow." That landed. Crow's face changed first. Barely. Just a tightening across the jaw. Reddick's smile vanished entirely. "You're bluffing," he said. Mrs. Ortega's voice cut from the crowd. "Boy left before breakfast on my best mule. I packed him myself." Others began speaking then, not loudly, but enough. Enough for courage to realize it was not alone. Crow drew his revolver, and the street flinched backward. "Quiet!" he barked. Cole swung down from the mare, despite the wound, and moved to stand beside June. He was pale, blood seeping fresh under his coat, but steady. The blue thread bracelet showed at his wrist when his hand dropped near his gun. Reddick looked at him with open disgust. "You faithless dog." Cole didn't blink. "I was. That's why this hurts." Crow leveled the revolver at June. "Last chance. Hand it over." June held Daniel's watch in one hand and the ledger pages in the other. "You shot a man over arithmetic, Asa." "That's the ugliest confession I ever heard." Crow's lip curled. "Daniel should have minded his books. And you should have minded hell." The shot came quick, not from Crow, from Ezra Bell's younger brother, hidden near the hitch rail, trying to take Cole through the spine. Cole turned at the flash and shoved June sideways. The bullet tore through his shoulder instead, spinning him hard to one knee. The street exploded. Crow fired at once. June heard the round crack past her ear. The blacksmith's hammer flew from somewhere in the crowd and smashed Crow's wrist. His second shot went wild into the church sign. Mateo's eldest son lunged and tackled the deputy by the rail. Mrs. Ortega snatched up the fallen rifle beside the feed store and covered Reddick with a steadier hand than most soldiers owned. June dropped behind a water trough. Pages clutched tight, Daniel's watch cold against her palm. Dust burst from the trough edge as bullets slammed into it. Horses screamed. People ran, ducked, shouted names. Cole, bleeding and furious, took cover behind the hitching post and shouted, "Crow! It ends now!" Crow had his left hand on a backup pistol, face twisted with pain and panic. He backed toward the courthouse door, meaning stone walls, records, maybe dynamite in the evidence cellar if desperation stripped him to the bone. June saw his path before he took it. If he got inside, he would burn everything. She rose from behind the trough and rang the church bell rope with both hands. One peal split the gunfire, then another. The sound rolled over, Dry Creek huge and iron deep, turning heads, freezing motion for one thin, impossible instant. In that instant June stepped onto the trough rim above everyone and held the pages high. "These names are yours," she shouted. "These acre numbers are yours. These watermarks, debts, transfers. Daniel counted every theft, and Crow killed him for it." She read them aloud then, voice carrying between storefronts and wagon wheels. Widow Barrick. Sanchez, Ortega's cousin on the South Fork. Miller's Orchard. The dead, the cheated, the driven out. Each name struck the crowd like another bell. Crow lunged for the courthouse door. Cole could have shot him in the back. June saw the clear line, saw Cole see it too. Instead, he fired low. The bullet shattered Crow's knee. Crow crashed on the courthouse steps with a scream that turned half the town colder than any sermon ever had. Why? June asked later. She would not know. But in the moment, it came out of her like breath. Cole kept his gun on the fallen sheriff. Because dead is easy. Reddick bolted for his horse. Mrs. Ortega shot the hat off his head at 20 paces and said, in a voice dry as flour, "Try again." He didn't. By noon it was over. Crow bled under guard in a jail cell he had filled too often with the wrong men. Reddick sat shackled on the courthouse porch, coat dusty at last, watching the town that had feared him decide all at once to stop. Statements were taken, papers compared. The preacher swore before witnesses that the copies had gone north. Men who had kept silent for years found their tongues when silence no longer looked safe. Cole sat in the shade of the livery wall while June stitched his shoulder. He winced once. "Still getting careless," she murmured. "Still alive." She tied the bandage, then looked at him for a long moment. "You spared Crow. He deserved to hear the verdict." June thought of Daniel's letter against her heart. "Do not let them teach you silence, and call it peace." "No," she said softly. He did. Weeks later, after the territorial judge sent deputies and chains and official paper with seals too heavy to ignore, Dry Creek began the slow work of becoming honest. It looked less like triumph than labor usually does. Repaired fences, reopened wells, accounts rewritten in daylight, burned timber hauled away from June's land. She rebuilt the boarding house smaller. Cole built the porch himself, after his shoulder healed enough to lift a hammer straight. He stayed, old answers for one lifetime. Some evenings, they spoke of Daniel, not as a wall between them, but as a man whose courage had reached farther than his years. Some evenings they spoke of nothing at all. The valley learned to let silence mean rest. On the first cool night of autumn, June finished shuttering the kitchen window and found Cole waiting on the porch, hat in hand, sky amber behind him. He moved aside so she could sit. She did. Neither said much. They did not need to. Below them, the lane ran west through tall grass silvered by moonrise. Beyond it, the repaired well creaked steadily, drawing up clear water for families who no longer had to ask permission to drink. June slipped her hand into his, and this time, when the past called after her from the dark places where it had lived so long, she never looked back, only forward, toward the wide black horizon and the porch lamp glowing warm behind them like a little stubborn star. Word count 900.